Let's shift to the running back position, where I first want to talk about a player that is not going to be participating at the Senior Bowl that I was really looking forward to seeing. That's Kalel Mullings coming out of Michigan. Man, I mean, this is one of those situations, out with a minor injury, total bummer, because I think he had more than anybody to gain. Because most of the time, like, we've seen converted wide receivers, Antonio Gibson, converted quarterbacks, Roschon Johnson, they really don't stand out for fantasy purposes aside for like a season or two. Like, you occasionally get like the Cordell Patterson, like year 10 or 11 in his career, pops off. Tyrone Tracy, he was great as a rookie. Gibson was really good as a rookie, but they usually don't have a ton of staying power in the league. Well, how about a converted linebacker? That's Kalel Mullings. 948 rushing yards this past year, 12 touchdowns over who many believed was the incumbent at Michigan, Donovan Edwards, who only had 550 rushing yards, 4 touchdowns this year. Like, Donovan Edwards, like, the dude was on the damn NCAA cover. Like, he was hyped coming in this year. Yeah, and Mullins just was absolutely much better of a running back. 6'2", 233, thick son of a bitch who's a bruiser. I like that he's physical between the tackles, but at the same time has great vision to find the hole. I would thought we would learn a lot from him in this pre-draft process, because I don't know if his explosiveness is there. I don't know if his top line speed is there to become anything more than like a day 3 running back dart throw. Total bummer. I think he could have really moved up draft boards, and I feel like I'm not going to learn as much and know as much about Kalel Mullings that he's anything more than like a final round Dynasty rookie guy at this point, not seeing him down there in Mobile. Do you agree, Eric, or do you think maybe we can see something from him at the combine if he even runs?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really the thing, right? Like, it puts the emphasis on him to participate fully at the NFL draft combine, right? So
Yeah.
I don't think that the ship has sailed for him by any means, right? He can still continue to, make and add to his case, but his margin of error when they're in Indianapolis has gotten much thinner, right? So it's, I mean, he's a player that's got some holes in his game that, is going to need to show some things in this process, and just, mathematically he has a shorter opportunity to do so. So I think he can still pop. I think he can still find his way onto a roster, right? Like, he's kind of got that bruising, like almost Brian Robinson type of style, right?
Yeah,
Where,
I think it's good comp.
Like, there's a role for that on a lot of NFL teams, right? He's not going to be a feature back, but there are absolutely rosters that need that type of skill set. So he goes out there and does it. I think he can still find himself drafted for sure.
Steve, does kind of what we saw with Blake Corum in his rookie year and the lack of usage scare you away from someone like Mullings, who was really the RB3 when Corum was on this Michigan team? And he's like, a lot of people are kind of coming out and saying, oh, it was the offensive line at Michigan that was really, what was boosting Corum, and now potentially Mullings and Edwards. Like, does that scare you off at all? Because to me, it doesn't. I like running backs coming from the Big Ten.
Does it scare me off? A little bit, because I don't really love Blake Corum as a prospect. What will scare me off of Mullings at this point is his 40 time. You know my rule. If you don't run a sub 4.5, I don't want you as my running back. And I don't know if at 6'2", to whatever he's pushing at this point, he's going to be able to get past that. Yeah, Brian Robinson's a solid comp, I guess, at his highest end. I think for Mullings, he could be Brian Robinson, but realistically, he's just kind of a plodding runner. He's slow. He's
could
not
be
able
Zamir
to...
White. Could be Zamir White.
Yeah, he could be like Zamir White, maybe a little bit slower
Yeah.
than that. Even like, it's just like Isaiah Spiller comes to mind.
Oh, geez, I hate Isaiah. No offense. I'm sure he's a great guy. I was never high on Spiller. That was the one guy in that draft class I was like, pump the brakes on.
That's who comes to mind when I think of guys like this. Like, it's just not anything. It's not going to draft him in the 4th round of your dynasty drafts at your own risk. Like, it's probably inconsequential, honestly. But
yeah,
I don't think this was going to be the showing.
Since we're talking about the Rams backfield, I'm less concerned about what happened with Corum. That has everything to do with McVay just locking in on his guy, and the guy that he locked in on, a top 5 running back in fantasy football this year, Kyren Williams, who ran a 4.6540. Obviously, the exceptions are out there, but
the exception,
generally, I think your rule is bang on, Steve.
I will also say that I usually speak when it comes to like Senior Bowl and stuff like that, very in NFL terms. Kyron Williams is not a good running back. Like by any measure, by any metric, he's not good. He's not efficient. He's not breaking tackles. He doesn't hit home runs.
He's an above average NFL
he's the
guy.
He's the poster child of opportunity having a greater impact than skill.
Yeah, like he's not an above average running back. Any other running back in that situation that's starting in the NFL, almost every other starting running back would do more.
Yeah, God. All right,
your day will come. Yes. Never wrong, Seth. Just early.
I know. Steve, I do want to go to your running back sleeper here that you highlight. It's Trevor Etienne coming from Florida. Eventually transfers to Georgia for his senior year. And this was another guy that I just thought had a kind of like Donovan Edwards. I thought was really going to have a great season. Just overall disappointing for Georgia, I think, as a whole. And he really became a rotational committee back down there, and actually regressed a little bit in the yards per attempt metric, down from 5.7 and 6.1 the years before, down to 5.0. Had some nice games like against Texas in both those contests, so that was good to see. But I'm a little low on Trevor Etienne, especially kind of after what Travis did this past year in the NFL too. And you guys know me, I rode the Travis Etienne hype all in 23. He won me a lot of money that year. So mixed opinions here on me for Etienne. Do you also have mixed opinions? And what do you think we can learn in this pre-draft process, specifically down here at the Senior Bowl, where on a lot of people's winners boards already?
Yeah, so I'm not going to hold what his brother did against him. I think that's just that sounds like a personal issue that I'm happy to talk with you about after the show. But yeah, it was a down year, and it was a down year for a guy that everybody thought was going to have an up year. I think we really undervalued how important Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers were to the Georgia Bulldogs. That's what happened. At least that's what I think happened. I don't think Trevor Etienne forgot how to play football by any means. And I would like to see him show us that he's explosive, can hit holes, read, and do a little pass blocking. I'd like to see a little more 3-down capability out of him. This Senior Bowl, I am low on him. I'm low on him, but I'm low on Georgia in general. Everyone just looked not good.
Yeah.
But what the fuck do I know, right? Because Carson Beck's making $8 million a year for the Miami Hurricanes, and I'm doing this show for free. So, who am I? So Trevor Etienne, I think he could very easily have a great Senior Bowl and bump his stock way, way, way up. I think he's plenty talented. It's just, can he translate it to game time?
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about Trevor Etienne is he does offer some upside as a pass catcher, a lot like his brother. And I think that's maybe where we could see some potential interest from teams. 32 receptions this past year, a career high for him. I'd also kind of like to stay in that pass catching niche here of running backs and introduce LeQuint Allen, running back from Syracuse, to everyone as well. It was a really strong season for the Orange under Fran Brown, finishing 10-3. Kyle McCord looked electric up there in the Dome. LeQuint Allen finishes with back-to-back seasons over 1,000 yards, top 7 in the ACC, scored 30 combined touchdowns in that span, first in the conference this year in rushing touchdowns. The real boost, though, this season with McCord at quarterback, though, it was the reception, boys. 64 receptions. That's a huge mark for any college football running back. I know from a pro standpoint, 64 is not crazy amount or anything, but
it would be third in the league this year.
Yeah. I guess compared to previous years,
I think that's Alvin Kamara numbers.
Yeah, down year Alvin Kamara numbers for sure. We don't see a ton of running backs anymore getting, upwards of 90 plus receptions. We do see it occasionally. But LeQuint Allen, absolutely awesome to watch. I can specifically remember watching him on a Friday night against UNLV. He put the team on his back, 4 touchdowns, overtime. There was a specific play in there, and I was like, man, this guy might be the real deal, because he was stopped short of the line, 2 yards behind it, and just put the team on his back, continue to push forward and get the yards he needed. Also cashed me that underdog ticket, so I'm a big fan of LeQuint Allen. Could be just probably another day 3 pick, but I look forward to seeing if he can separate himself with his pass blocking and with his catching ability here. Very similar to Trevor Etienne. So, Eric, I want to ask you, Etienne, LeQuint Allen, do you think they have potential to separate themselves because of their pass catching ability in a loaded, absolutely loaded running back class in 2025?
Yeah, to an extent, right? I think the thing to really hone in on is not their ability as a pass catcher, but their ability as a pass blocker, and that's absolutely
Yeah.
what I'll be looking for during this process, specifically with the Senior Bowl, right? Like, if you want to be a pass catcher, you want to be on the field when your team is in third down and in long distance to go. You got to make sure you're not
Yeah.
getting your quarterback completely blown up. So I think that will probably be a bit more determinative than their ability to make a linebacker look silly in one-on-one drills.
Mhm.
Moreover than anything else, like I certainly hope that NFL front offices and scouting teams are not prisoners of the moment, because look, ETN's Georgia tape is good, right? Fine. His Florida tape is electric. Like, if they go back just one season, I think they will absolutely fall in love. So if I had to
Okay.
pick one of the two to kind of do a bit more
Mhm.
rising, I do think it'll be ETN. And while his brother's performance should have no bearing on his draft capital, look, Q rating is a legitimate thing, right? Like, guys in NFL front offices see that a player has a brother who's been able to have some margin of success in the NFL ranks, and they give him a little bit more latitude,
Yeah.
right? Same things happen with James Cook, right? Being related to Dalvin Cook, you're now familiar with him. You think you
Yeah.
can draw some more comparisons that may or may not be there. So I do think it plays in his favor a bit, although it probably shouldn't.
Mhm. Eric, I want to talk about your rookie sleeper, and crazy to call this guy a sleeper after the 2023 season he had.
Yeah.
Doak Walker Award winner, the best running back in the nation a year ago, over 1,700 yards, was Ollie Gordon for Oklahoma State. And look, man, I was buying into the hype coming into this season. I thought especially what he could do, not only as a rusher, but as a pass catcher. Almost 40 receptions last year, 300 receiving yards as well. Like, to see the fall off, had almost 100 fewer carries this year, almost 1,000 fewer rushing yards. And like, I had the ticket on Oklahoma State to win the Big 12. Like, I was way overly invested. And Eric, they kind of just fell apart down the stretch. So what do you think we can see from Ollie Gordon? Because I think it's another case of recency bias, if you would. I think we kind of forget what he did in 2023, just because 2024, such an off year for this program, man. Like, so many questions. We've seen the defense go down since they lost Knowles at defensive coordinator a couple of years ago. And like, I'm sad, man. That hurt me. That hurt me, and that hurt the bankroll.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a guy that you just need to go back 2 years and look at his tape, and you'll absolutely fall in love. And that's Ollie Gordon, a player that I spent early draft round capital over at our friends at Squad Blitz when we drafted
Yeah.
our IBT team heading into the college football season. For those that are not looking back 2 seasons, 2023, where he won that Doak Walker Award, 2,062 scrimmage yards, 1,700 rushing, 324 through the air. So absolutely a dynamic playmaker that can not only gash you on the ground, but is a very effective receiver. I'll say arguably, realistically, he's more like in the conversation to be among the best pass protectors of the running backs that are in this year's class. Ergo, he has, he's checking that needful box that he's not going to be a liability, and they can just evaluate his ability as a runner. Look, the fall off this year was kind of weird. I'm closer to your side of the spectrum, where I think it has a little bit more to do with Oklahoma State on the whole just kind of
Yeah.
falling apart, and that
Oh,
dragging down Ollie Gordon's production.
right.
I mean, look, he wasn't great this year, facing off against stacked boxes. So if he goes to, a very early stage rebuild where they don't have, a
Raiders.
viable quarterback, where their offensive line is beat up, maybe like the Raiders,
Yeah.
then it could be tough sledding for him, getting up to speed at the NFL level. If he goes a little bit later, where he goes to a more established team, they have someone that's functional at quarterback and a decent offensive line. I think this is a kid that can absolutely explode, right? Like, he's on a very short list of players who has a 100 yard rushing, 100 yard receiving game. He's got that good long speed, right?
Yeah.
Despite being 6'1", 211, like, He can pull away from some people in the open field. He's pretty good about getting what the offensive line blocks for him. I'd like to see him be a little bit more decisive when that hole opens up. But ultimately, like I think this is a kid that, given the right opportunity, can be a legitimate difference maker in the NFL level and has a solid shot at being a 3-down back very early on in his career.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And man, I've always been a pseudo kind of like closet Oklahoma State fan since like Mason Rudolph was back there in the day. And yeah, I love what they do down there in Stillwater. But Steve, just such a disappointing year for this entire program. It trickles down to Ollie Gordon. I was on Mag's show, the Dynasty Hot Seat, earlier today, and actually went through my top 24 rankings, my updated version. I have Ollie Gordon kind of square in the second round of rookie drafts. I think you would argue, I know you've been high on Ollie Gordon, that maybe currently as it stands, he's one of the steals of drafts, and you're probably hoping he doesn't move up too much higher in draft board, because I know you're all about him.
Yeah, I'm all in on Ollie Gordon at this point. I mean, listen, when a team sucks, the first position that's going to suffer is the running back. It's just naturally going to be that way because you're down. You can't establish the run. You're getting the stacked boxes. Your quarterback's bad. Your wide receivers aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. It was a mess. It was a mess, and that was not Ollie Gordon's fault, right? Like, defenses knew that the one thing they had to take away was Ollie Gordon. Anything after that, they were fine with. It didn't matter. Ollie Gordon profiles as a 3-down back. He profiles as a very good 3-down back. I think Ollie Gordon should be a Cincinnati Bengal next season.
Easy, bro. Chase Brown.
My Chase Brown shares.
Come on, dude.
I think
That's
Ollie
a good
Gordon
call.
should be a Cincinnati Bengal
Look
next
it
year.
easy.
I don't think Chase Brown's the guy. I think there's other teams that I could happily stick him on and be happy with it. I could see him being a Bear. I could see him being a Charger. I could see him potentially replacing David Montgomery and being in the 1-2 punch with Jahmyr Gibbs up in Detroit. There's a lot of ways you could go with that, but I mean, Montgomery's kind of locked in right now. Ollie Gordon is an NFL running back. Today, he'll be an NFL running back a year from now, 5 years from now, 6 years from now. He is my RB2 in this class. So I am happy to have him in the second round of drafts. I have him firmly as my RB2 just behind Ashton Genty.
Wow. Yeah, a lot of praise. We'll see what we hear from down at Senior Bowl. Already another guy who kind of making reports that, hey, maybe just a bad year. And again, this is why we love the Senior Bowl, because it's removing factors like potentially a toxic Oklahoma State.
Don't you wish he just left? Like, don't you wish he just left?
Yeah.
That's why you got to do it. Like, unless the NIL is so good, you got to go. You can't stay. I love loyalty.
I mean,
I do.
If the net of it is that he lands with the Chargers, like, giddy up. That would be
he'll run
such a
for
dream spot.
1,300, 1,400 yards on the Chargers.